Welcome back, listeners, to Don't Throw It All Away, where we hope to inspire action surrounding environmental issues, data security, digital privacy, and sustainability best practices. This is Comparnew's official podcast. Comparnew is a highly certified nonprofit electronics refurbisher and recycler based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with an environmental and an educational first mission. If you want to learn more, check out our website and various social media platforms. Links will be in the description below to find ways you can get involved. We're your hosts. I'm Peter.
And I'm Alex. Today we have a very special guest interview for you today with State Representative Carol Glanville. We're really excited to share her story and her work in education, digital literacy, providing access, touch on right to repair, solar panels. We really covered the gambit, and it was a really great conversation. So we're really excited to provide the insight and then her story as it relates to everything that we do here at Comparnew. So as you know, we dive into some short news segments before we get to that, the Reclaim Report. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, Microsoft Recall. In our first episode, we do touch on Microsoft Recall. That's their new AI capability coming to Windows 11. They came out with a feature. It's a thing that takes the little quick snapshots of your computer green as you're working, and it kicks it back to you later through AI. We made a comment about them changing the settings on there where you could toggle that switch on and off. And they've recently said, oops, that was not supposed to be a setting. So we were right about that one. It only took them a week. So Carol and I touch on that. So you'll hear more about that in the episode. I won't spoil too much of the fun. The EPA announced another $117 million in grant funding going to recycling infrastructure and food waste composting initiatives. So really great to see some more funding coming down the pipeline. Nothing specifically about electronics recycling, but hey, a rising tide lifts all boats. Bamboo toilet paper, also on the rise, environmentally friendly to grow and easily broken down, shall we say, after the fact. It is an environmentally friendly alternative. May be weird to think about your toilet paper, but hey, bamboo toilet paper on the rise, would give a shout out to them. Keurig K-Cups, as you know them, apparently Keurig and Dr. Pepper are the same company, so there's that. I learned that today. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is doing a lot more to help the EPA regulate some environmental issues. And so K-Cups recently incurred a $1.5 million civil penalty for inaccurate statements regarding the recyclability of K-Cups. So basically they said they were nice and easily recyclable. It turns out that multiple groups in the United States did testing on them, and they have some significant concerns and do not presently intend to accept them for recycling. So not really what they're marketing out there. The SEC is fined them $1.5 million. And it actually comes off the back of a story in Canada where the Canadian government also fined the same company $3 million and asked them to pay an extra $800,000 donation to Canada's environmental charitable organization. So another thing there. And last one of these rapid fires, Apple did their recent event, the September event. They launched some new AirPods. Well, they're not available yet, but they're coming soon. New AirPods that will have hearing aids, clinical grade hearing aids built into them. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. It's nice to think about maybe killing two birds with one stone, as they say, where we are actually purchasing less equipment to accomplish the same things. It could also have a great opportunity for competition in the market. Those AirPods are about $200, give or take. And sometimes those hearing aids are like $2,000 and upward per ear. So it could be a really interesting choice. We don't advocate for buying Apple products that often, but hey, perhaps there's some legitimacy here. So interested to see where that takes us. You have any Apple news, Peter?
I do. Speaking of Apple unveiled just a few weeks ago, they launched their latest version of the iPhone operating system, iOS 18, which includes a controversial update for folks in the right to repair space. So Apple has touted this feature for years now that they call activation lock. It works on iPhones, iPads, Macs, etc. And for those of you who don't know, when you turn on Find My iPhone, when you set up your device, it toggles this setting on where if somebody were to steal your device or attempt to erase it and set it up like new, it'll stop them and prompt them with your Apple ID username and password. So what's new here in iOS 18 is they're extending this feature not just to the whole iPhone, but specifically to iPhone parts themselves.
So like even the batteries and things?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So if you try to harvest a battery or a screen or a charge port, etc., from one of these iPhones, and then when you go to actually boot up your iPhone again and begin to use it, you may find yourself locked out completely until you're able to enter the Apple ID username and password from the original owner of that part.
So you can replace parts, but it sounds like they're making it more difficult to do that.
Absolutely. And so Apple is citing that this is something that will deter thieves from attempting to steal your iPhone and resell those parts. But a lot of the backlash from the community has been negative, in that this is kind of an example of something called parts pairing, which you see a lot in the industry. We've talked about that before on this podcast, and it's a practice that can be pretty consumer hostile and repair hostile.
Yeah, explains their new repair shop where they're dishing out repair pieces and stuff for you to purchase. So
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, Apple is sending a very, very clear message with this, that while they have made steps to make their devices more repairable, at the same time, they still very much want to ensure that they are really the only ones who can provide you with quality parts and service.
Interesting.
Yeah. What else you got for me, Alex?
Yeah, okay. Well, speaking of iPhones, some really great transitions here today. Speaking of iPhones, if you've ever wondered, are they listening to you? You just might be right. So recently, a media group, CMG, one of their presentations just leaked, and it has language in there, quote, active listening. So they're using AI combined with voice data to map out online behavioral aspects of their customers and users to deliver hyper-targeted advertising. So this was in a presentation that they gave to, allegedly gave to Facebook, Meta, Google, Amazon, those big companies that are tracking your data. They all have gone on record and are denying it. It's interesting, though, that they all use this group. They've all had to deny it. And I mean, if you're sitting at home talking about something, tell me you've not had an ad pop up. Well, it's a little spooky. So
yeah, it's an eerie feeling, like you're talking about like dog toys with a friend you're sitting next to, and then a few minutes later, it's like all you can see on your feed is like toys. Advertisements for dog food and dog toys and accessories and all of that. So something I feel like maybe a lot of us had kind of suspected is happening for a while, but like this is some confirmation. This actually happens in the advertising industry.
Yeah, this presentation was actually leaked, and it does have some pretty damning evidence for the fact that they are being using this kind of data. So even just like consumers that are, quote, ready to buy and creating ad lists based on spoken intention. So
just goes to show, check your privacy settings.
Yeah, great shout out for the privacy settings and accepting all those things that your apps say. Do you want us to track and activate your voice and your camera and stuff like that? This goes back to that, like put the piece of tape over your camera on your computer. Maybe it's time to start thinking about those things again. But
yeah, it almost sounds like a stretch to some people, but it's really not that much of a stretch.
No, I guess that's what we're confirming here. And then also an interesting thing came up in this article, that research shows that 91% of people that agree to terms and conditions, they agree to them without reading them, 91%. And that number jumps to 97% for those aged 18 to 24.
This is an audio podcast, but you can't see me raising me raising my hand right now. I'm one of those people.
We might be guilty of that, but like you said, a good shout out to maybe just hunker down a little bit, batten the hatches, because some of the stuff, they're going to keep doing it, and it's going to keep getting more ingrained in there. So
yeah, and make an effort to understand what you are accepting when looking at those EULAs.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Is that my cue to jump in?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about how to EULA. Not everyone's going to know what that means, but user license agreement. What does the E stand for? Internet,
end user license agreement. Cool. So I got one other thing to share with you today. So this is more of an uplifting story about a group called Three Rivers Energy Partners. So this is a group started by their president and CEO, John Rivers. And yeah, this is a Michigan-based company. And they have a program going right now where they are using spent grains from distilleries and the distilling process to produce renewable fuels in order to reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions and enhance soil health. So this is a pretty uplifting story just about the environment. So yeah, John Rivers, I mean, he was quoted saying that, we're trying to solve an issue for a manufacturer, whether it's Jim Beam or Jack Daniels, and then return those nutrients to the farmers as fertilizer. We're very much into the agricultural side, and we use RNG to pay for that solution. So in this case, RNG stands for renewable natural gas.
Oh.
So, John Rivers, he founded Hillstone Environmental Partners in 2015 before selling the company to start this current venture back in 2020. So basically at a distillery, the whiskey making process yields alcohol and something called stillage, which is just a wet waste product. Supposedly this stillage can be a big challenge for distilleries and historically has required a lot of time and money to dispose of it. So Three Rivers is constructing something called a wet anaerobic digester and a biogas upgrade plant. So that will basically take in all this stillage to produce biogas and digest it, which can be refined into usable and renewable natural gas, as well as a natural liquid fertilizer.
Wow.
Yeah, just a byproduct of something that they'd be making
That's
anyway.
pretty incredible. That's based here in the United States?
That's based right here in Michigan.
In Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So Three Rivers right now is working with Jack Daniels and Jim Beam alongside 6 other distilleries in the U.S., as well as one distillery in Mexico, a tequila distillery in Mexico, to bring these RNG plants to life. Yeah, currently the Jack Daniels facility is in its testing phase, with more to come soon. But basically this is going to allow them to utilize renewable energy to run their operations, as well as partner with some farmers, specifically corn growers.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. So Jack Daniels per se would deliver leftover grains or like runoff and, whatever the byproduct is to our group here, Three Rivers, and they would turn it into
renewable energy in the form of natural gas. And liquid fertilizer.
Wow.
So, I mean, and that wouldn't even need to be delivered per se, but ideally this all happens right on site and is used to generate electricity for their operation. And they're saying this can cut down their emissions up to 50%.
Yeah,
which is a big win for the environment.
Yeah,
and something that is scalable and repeatable for others in the industry as well.
Yeah, super cool. Wow. Looking forward to learning more about that. That is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll try to cover that here if there are any developments in that story.
Michigan loves their farmers. So, hey, anything to keep them going.
Absolutely.
Okay, super cool. Speaking of other state initiatives, this one actually coming to us from Illinois. The Illinois EPA is actually teaming up with a few people. They're going to do a statewide study, build a toolkit for their residents, and an interactive map and a smartphone coach, if you will, to identify recyclables and what to do with all of your different recycling needs. One of the groups providing the app and education in particular is called Recycle Coach. They're actually based out of Toronto. I had the pleasure of meeting them actually at a Kalamazoo conference last year. And the guy that I met with there, his name is Josh, and he's now the president. Really great people over there, really cool mission, but props to the Illinois EPA for bringing recycling statewide, but also this Recycle Coach as an app tailors each community tailors the app to each community to identify like what needs to happen. They'll even cite specific businesses or whatever your recycling program looks like in your city. They kind of tailor each community, so that when you could go and take like a little quiz about what you recycle and stuff, and it'll provide all the resources and everything, which is super great. So obviously, the scale of what happens city to city is pretty extensive. So this is going to cover all 12.5 million Illinois residents, 6,800 units of local government. It's available at no cost to Illinois communities. So I think like the state government is probably taking care of that, or, whatever it is they do to work that out. But yeah, it's like pretty cool. I bring this up because one, it's a cool story about bringing that education and like just being able to go onto an app on your phone and like, look up where everything needs to go is super easy and straightforward. That really jumps a few hurdles, but also it doesn't exist in Michigan yet. So
yeah, I was going to say we could all use a tool like that.
I know, maybe
not just in Illinois, but
maybe we can convince a few people to reach out to these guys and support that. So I think like if you or I were to go on there right now and say that we were from Grand Rapids, like it would be still helpful but limited because there's not all these little workflows set up about where to take your stuff. But yeah, so it's gonna cover a lot of ground, which is really great. Obviously it'll probably take them some time to roll out, but really exciting development, as I know Recycle Coach has been here and there with different large cities and things like that, and maybe they have other states, I don't know, but it's really cool to see one whole state kind of hop on board and say,
absolutely. And just another example of breaking down some of those barriers so people understand what they need to do or what they're able to do in order to recycle and make a positive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, making a positive difference in your community, our guest again is State Representative Carol Glanville, and we're very excited to, continue this conversation on, state responsibility and developments with her. So enjoy.
My work has always been part of my life. I mean, in the way that I see my work as more of a vocation than like kind of a calling, working with people. And so I started out as an educator, and I've been an educator for about 25 years. I've worked all over internationally. I was in Chicago for a number of years. And when I landed back in West Michigan, which is where I was born and raised, there was not a teacher shortage. I had some trouble finding a job. And so I bounced around a little bit and did some long-term subbing and different things, and took the opportunity to finish up my master's degree. And that was before ed tech existed. And so the degree I got was called Technology and Curriculum Design. And that launched me into doing work with Grand Rapids Public Schools in their tech department. We were doing a program it's called Believe to Become, where Title I students were getting one-to-one computers. These were not Chromebooks because they were not on the market at the time. And so just doing a lot of that work, training the kids, training the teachers, training families a little bit. And I said we crossed paths with CompreNew in that work. And then I eventually moved on to the Catholic secondary schools. They were running a program here in Grand Rapids where they wanted to implement one-to-one iPads in their classrooms. And so I headed up that program and worked with them for about 4 or 5 years, getting that off the ground. And again, it was a whole new piece of technology integration, and then at that time, again, iPads had come on the market. They were going to be usable for schools. Apple was working on setting all that up. And so we used iPads. And again, that was before Chromebooks were on the market. So I did that work, and that took me into a space where I was doing some internet safety work for a while, making presentations across the country, that sort of thing. So with my experience in schools, the opportunity came up for me to be a part of my city commission. They had an open seat, and I put in for the appointment. I was chosen unanimously among 4 candidates. So I was seated on my city commission, and the reason I went in that direction was when I was thinking about the work I had done in schools. Some people asked me if I was interested in city commission. I said, I don't know, But then I gave it some thought, and I realized that the skills I had from the schools really applied really well to city governance. You have a really broad constituency. You have competing priorities. You have buckets of money with strings attached to it. All of these things. And so I felt like it was really a good transfer for my skills and a good place to use the skills I had developed. And so I stepped up for my city commission. And when the state house seat came open in our area, I decided to go in that direction and just take it to the next level, which I see as a capstone to my career as an educator, because now I chair the higher ed committee. I'm also on K-12 and among others. But this is where I really get to implement, after 25 years of working in a variety of educational settings, and particularly with technology. I've already been able to implement some legislation and work with folks on developing policy that is stuff that, as teachers, being a teacher and working with teachers like that, I've heard time and time again, we should do this or we should do that. So I'm in a place now to actually do this or that. So that's really satisfying, and it's nice to come full circle that way. And on the personal side, I've always, environmental interests have always been kind of my hobby, I guess, second gig. I've always just been really interested in just basic environmental stewardship. So, when we were working with the devices in the both programs, we were looking for things like CompreNew and how we could, not be throwing these devices away, and better ways to reuse them and things like that. But then also, like I said, on the personal side, I got involved with the West Michigan Trails. I'm also an on-again, off-again avid biker. So, and so in working with West Michigan Trails, I get to support the work that they're doing in developing non-motorized trails and mobility, and then all of the sort of environmental work that comes alongside that, right, of responsible development.
Do you feel like you had trouble when you were pushing responsible recycling and not just throwing them away? Did you run into a lot of pushback, or just people who didn't know that was a thing that happens?
Yeah. Not really. I think the environment I was working in, we were really looking for that. And I imagine they still do this, but they were buyback programs, right? We were leasing devices and trading them back in for the next model up. And then what they do with those leased devices, they refurbish them and sell them and things like that. So but that was really a thoughtful piece of what we were doing, was how do we, recycle these devices and things. And even at the diocese, I was a little bit more engaged in really specifically the one-to-one. At GRPS, I was doing more of the general tech and working alongside our IT department and the tech, our repair teams and things like that. And so that's where I really learned a lot about that too, is just what do you do with these old devices that aren't necessarily unusable, but not appropriate for this setting anymore. And so, I was really pleased at the time that the head of the department there, our tech department, was looking for those opportunities and building those partnerships and doing some really responsible reuse and really thinking too, knowing, the population at GRPS, that there are a lot of families that would be looking for gently used equipment.
Yeah.
And equipment that probably was relatively safe in terms of it hadn't been necessarily, virus ridden and things like that. Yeah. Because it had been in a school setting, right? So it had been protected and well cared for and things like that, right? So it's just a matter of kind of getting it out of the enterprise and into a private use situation, and how we could go about doing that and provide resources to our families. And again, this is, I talk about so long ago, but this was 15 years ago. And really, people didn't have computer. It wasn't every home had a computer, or if they did, it was just one, and it was dial-up. Well, probably wasn't dial-up at that time, but it wasn't what it is. It wasn't DSL, right?
Right.
It's not what or broadband, it's not what it is today. And so, parents and kids were sharing one big box device, things like that. And so just in terms, like I said, of helping to get some equality and equity into the system and helping families have access to technology as their needs were growing was important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And like you said, as time goes on, it gets more advanced and harder to stay up with it. And if you, nowadays, you have to have a device, you have to have internet access to be a part of the world that's moving along. So making sure that people are
have that access and have like basic training on how to use it, right? And like jobs nowadays are remote, and even applying for the jobs and whatnot. So and you mentioned legislation that you were able to implement, and on this point, recently you passed some legislation as it relates to schooling and this exact issue, right? Like training and computer labs in schools. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so the bill, it's a pretty simple bill. It requires all of our high schools to offer computer science. It is not a requirement for students to take a computer science class, but that it is on offer for them, and in a way that it is available to every student. So a lot of schools are offering something through like a CTE program, but if you're not, enrolled in that program, you're not going to get that opportunity. Just having it out there, and it can be taken in any format. So, there were some folks who questioned, well, what if the school doesn't have the resources or the teacher or things like that? It's like, you can, first of all, every school has the resources because, at the very base level, you need basically, a Chromebook or, some kind of device and internet access, and you can learn computer science. You don't need, fancy materials and servers and tools and things. I mean, as you get more advanced, of course, yes, but, this is really just the opportunity for kids to have that entry level instruction. And then to also, the goal for me is not only make sure every kid has the opportunity for the instruction, but then to help normalize that within the school, because so many teachers, at this point, we don't have a computer science certification. And so the folks who teach computer science in our schools or who implement it in their classes are those who've taken it on really as a personal interest, right? And have just done the homework because they like it or they see the benefit or whatever motivates them personally. And so it's very hit or miss, like the pockets of opportunity that kids get and the level of practice and expertise they might have in those settings and things like that. And so this is a way to help, push our schools in that direction a little bit without making it a requirement that's going to hold kids back or that's going to really, force the schools into some kind of financial constraints in terms of having the right types of equipment and servers and people and all those things. Yeah. So students can take those classes virtually. There's some great online programs for getting started in computer science that they can easily access, and the schools can help them connect if they can't offer it on site.
Yeah, of course. That's so interesting. Yeah, not having a computer science certification. I don't know if I wasn't even aware of that myself. So obviously you know better than most. Do you see us heading in that direction where we implement something like that?
I think, there's definitely conversation around it. Some of the pushback not pushback, I should say, but one of the things to keep in mind is what you were just saying a little bit ago, like technology moves so quickly. It's hard to say what makes you a computer science certified teacher. Like I taught English and Spanish, those don't change. Like I learned English, I learned Spanish, I might incorporate new books and new resources and update things like a little bit on the cultural side, but the basics of English and Spanish, and I would argue math and science, those are pretty standard knowledge topics, Where with computer science, I mean, just what I was talking about at the beginning, even 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have computers in the classroom, or we had one that the teacher was using, maybe 2 or 3 that kids would occasionally have the opportunity to get to, or there was a computer lab and we'd all go down, and do that. And
the good old computer lab.
And then the cows, and things and like that, which is the computer on wheels, those carts that the computers are on. So if you think about the speed with which technology, advances, it would be difficult, I think, to say somebody is computer science certified. That's not to say it can't happen, and there certainly are some fairly basic, areas of knowledge. I mean, there's certainly basic programming, there's basic IT security, there's basic, wiring and things like that. There's just the digital literacy piece, which is really that stepping up into computer science of really just understanding how to use the internet and how to use, all the things and the ethics and stuff like that. But once you start getting into some of that more advanced level, and then the other thing I want to be mindful of too is part of my intent is that I really want to help us move to a place where we have a little bit more integrated coursework. So my sort of argument is that you don't have to do computer science separate from your other core courses. You could be designing, you could do a book report that is like a video, or film or stop motion animation. And kids do this all the time.
Yeah.
And when you're doing science, there's computer science going on all over the place there.
Sure.
You're gathering data, same thing. You're doing all the work behind the scenes. You could be creating an algorithm, or in your math class, you could be studying algorithms and creating them and looking at how programming works, So I want to be careful too that we're not isolating technology, like here's your tech class and here's your math class. They should be together. And so if we're looking at certifying teachers and then saying only a certified teacher can do this, again, we're separating it and we're continuing this sort of, and we're getting out of this, but you might remember this attitude, or you've probably seen it. Oh, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
That's not me. I'm not the tech guy. And if we don't integrate these things, we allow people to continue that behavior or attitude or self-belief that really isn't true.
Sure, definitely. Well, it sounds like then, your recent bill that passed is going to just provide that opportunity and really take a big step in the right direction there. The quickness, again, like it would be tough to have teachers who keep up with the manufacturers. Like the manufacturers intentionally move so fast because they want everyone to buy the new thing. They want people to learn the new software. Next year, it's like even this Windows 10 to a Windows 11 jump is kind of crazy. We've been talking about it for a while, and they've got a whole new slew of features in there. So, like you said, integration and opportunities presented, and that's really great. So, are there any next steps then, aside from kind of what we've already talked about, that you see kind of our schools or just access and things that you're working on in that realm in particular?
Oh, I have lots of ideas.
Okay, we'll take a couple.
A couple of things that I want to put into place. One thing I'm working on is it's called the AADC code. Is a bill or a piece of legislation that many states are working on. A solid handful have incorporated it. I want to say maybe a dozen or so have a finished product on this. It's kind of what they were trying to do at the federal level, where they're trying to make the internet safer, protect kids' data better. And that's what this does. So in schools, a lot of people may not be aware, there's the COPPA, right? The Children's Online Privacy Protection Act that schools must follow in terms of, access to websites and what kind of data is stored where in your systems and things like that, alongside FERPA, which is another privacy law for schools and kids. So there's a couple things going on there that generally, if you're on a school operated device, you are relatively safe, or fairly, I should say. There's a really good safety mechanism in there for data privacy and such. Yes. And when you're on your own device, there's none. You're just cruising around the internet, unless you have somebody in your family who has established some of the tools that are available in the devices and online and things like that. It's just a free for all. You're all over the place, right? And this is where kids can easily be giving up data that then gets thrown into an algorithm, and then they get this targeted advertising, and they get led into another website, and they don't even realize they're switching from place to place, and that what the cookies are picking up from them and things like that. So it's really just it's a way to protect, like I said, the data security of kids, particularly who are unaware. And it could be as simple as putting up a warning on it, as you go in, like a pop-up that says, hey, you have to accept whatever, or know that this is how your data is being used, similar to what we're starting to see with, what they do in Europe, GSPL. But we all see that, we've changed the way we do cookies. Like, you have to kind of accept and say yes all the time, or never, or whatever, and things like that. So it's kind of going in that direction, but making it a little bit stronger for our kiddos. And then, so we're working on that. We've got quite a few stakeholders who are giving us input, and I'm hoping that bill will get across the line potentially yet this session, which means by the end of 2024. And then we'll see. If it doesn't, we'll pick it up again in 2025 and keep working on it. So
sure. Well, that's certainly a worthy effort. I imagine you have quite a few stakeholders. Like, who do you have? I imagine like schools and parent groups and different things. That's such an important issue. We talk about data security all the time here and from a business standpoint, but like just the way, you already touched on it, the way that web browsers or operating systems pick up your stuff, and like Chromebooks in particular, being a Google product, always make us a little like cringe, but thank goodness there's some laws in place.
You will be pleased to know then that Google is one of our main sponsors on this bill, and we've been working closely with them on it. So
well, that's amazing. I am very pleased to hear that. Yes, and knowing that there are laws in place that are protecting kids for these reasons, and that they are a stakeholder in this effort is very positive. So that's
they know their place, right? They really do. Obviously they have their interests, in terms of profits and things like that, but at the same time they also have an interest in really serving the community and their users, and their users are I don't know the numbers, but I would say far and away kids, because Chromebooks are so prevalent in schools. And again, if they're enterprise protected in school, that's one thing. But if they're bringing their own personal Chromebook potentially, or whatever, and in any case, when they're not at school or they're on their own phone and things like this, they're not going to have the same standard of protection. And so just knowing that, I think is great. And we can start locking down, a little bit on this and doing a little better for our kids.
So this particular effort that you mentioned, the AADC, is, would it be fair to say that it's kind of replicating those protections that happen in schools, but also at home outside of the schools for that reason?
Kind of. The schools are set to a much higher standard, really, than this bill. And that's because there's a little bit more liability, and things like that. And so this isn't, and to be clear, this is not a filter blocking device or policy. It's not like kids won't have access to these types of sites or these types of sites or that sort of thing. It's really more about knowing what data is being picked up from you, when and to whom, and then how that company can manipulate your data and how that company can store it and sell it. So that's the other piece. It's really it's really the data protection piece. It is up to individuals to protect themselves from what might be considered dangerous or inappropriate websites. We haven't gotten to the point where we're mandating how families do that. But in this case, from the business side, we can certainly control how corporations manipulate and utilize and sell the data of children. And so that's really what the goal is.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. If you need another stakeholder on board, I'm sure we'd be happy to support you in that mission. We definitely would be.
Get them down. Yep.
Just let us know. Yeah, there you go.
You can put in a card when we do testimony.
Absolutely, we would be happy to do that. That's truly great. Yeah, and so many people don't know that that's even like a prevalent issue, or maybe you are in an environment like a school that's taking care of that for you, and then you just assume that it's not happening or something on this side of it. They don't know.
They don't know. When I was working in internet safety, parents don't know. They don't know how things really happen on the internet, or even what's really happening on the internet. It was shocking to me when I was doing this work to learn that the average age for a kid to experience pornography online, the average age is 8. And
that means,
that means kids much younger than 8 are experiencing pornography.
Yeah.
And it's not happening at school because that's where those sites are blocked, right?
Yeah.
And so for our families, it's really important that I mean, it's hard, but it's important that people are up to date on some of these things and really taking the step to protect on their own home front. And that's another bill I'm kind of working on. It's something called Default to Safety, and it's in its sort of conceptual infancy stage. But it has to do with how when you purchase a new device, whether it's a gaming device, a computer, or phone, whatever, it comes to you with the default settings wide open. And it is up to you, the user, to lock down where you want security in place.
Yeah.
Which, again, most people don't know what those options are, how many of us go into the settings and walk through every single one of them and decide what we want, and then even understand what that means, like, as we're deciding, and then keep up with it as the updates come through, and things like that. We don't all have a personal IT department at our disposal. And we're lazy. I mean, humans are, we go with the path of least resistance. And, if it comes to me this way, I'll just use it this way. That's great. So if we switch that over so that the devices are required to be distributed or sold or whatever with full security tools in place, what applies here is the same thing. People are less likely to open things up because they will have to go in and figure it out or know what they want to change and how to change it. And again, path of least resistance, like, I don't care, I just want to use my device. And they'll look at it, if there's something stopping them, if they keep getting blocked from a certain website or app or whatever tool, they'll figure out how to open that one or, what they need to do to change their settings. But again, it's an opportunity to kind of flip, the responsibility. I understand there might be some interstate commerce laws that we have to work around.
Have to deal with.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's kind of a concept, but, that's another thing that we can be doing to shift, the experience of families and kids and things like that.
Yeah, that is so great to hear. I'm getting so amped up. Let me know how to help. Because let us know how to help. Seriously, I do mean that, because that touches on so many things, as you've already stated, but the kind of the flip in responsibility when you buy something, ultimately you would hope, and for a long time we've expected manufacturers and different things to have our best interests in mind, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they're like, well, we're just going to give you the thing and let you figure it out, and we're going to make our money, and as you said, leave the settings wide open, and because they get the data out of what they want.
Well, and not only that, I think the argument is, like, if I give it to you, like, it's not going to be the best user experience. It's not going to be, you don't have full access to everything that you might want.
Sure.
So it's kind of that balance of, like, and some people might say that by putting those restrictions in place, we are restricting the free rights of the buyer. I should make the choice what gets shut down. It shouldn't be given to me, So I see that flip side argument. So it's just like kind of balancing that. And like for you and me, we're like, of course, yes, let's do that. But again, like I said, I see that other side argument, and I understand that. So that's another thing, is just figuring out how to work that. And maybe there's a middle ground of where we can, where some things are, I don't know, if we go through it, and can define settings and user rights and things like that. Maybe it's a user bill of rights.
Hey, I like the sound of that. Yeah. Well, even just as far as like the devices themselves, and that's obviously what we're, focused on a lot of the time, is like some of those things just come a certain way and you buy it and you expect that maybe they thought about how it's going to be recycled and that they have it all figured out, but really they kind of took the other approach on it, where it's like, well, we just wanted to provide a user experience and make the most money, and here you go. And then nobody tends to think about where it all ends up. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, there are certain groups out there who are thinking about that, and thank goodness for them. But the manufacturers and different things of not thinking about those things, or just expecting the consumer to figure it out, sometimes can be a bad path to head down. But obviously, this is a little different. There's a lot to work around, and certainly we do hear that argument of user experience and allowing people. That's interesting that you say that, allowing people to choose their thing, but then they would have to know that that's how it's set up, and that they would need to go into their settings and change those things. And so obviously maybe taking that full circle back to what you mentioned already about age appropriate design code and things and default to safety, is that they would have to have the education to know that they need to go in and change settings. And that's not always happening either. And then just a small anecdote, I'm not, maybe you're already aware, but Microsoft 11 on this note is moving toward, everyone's moving towards AI capable devices and operating systems and stuff. And recently they released a kind of an update called Microsoft Recall, and it takes pictures of your device, like the screen of your device, every 3 seconds, and it stores that data for 3 months, and it uses it to educate your personal AI assistant. They call it Cortana, or the Copilot program that just rolled out and stuff. And they left it as a toggle on-off setting switch, like you just mentioned. They left it on because you bought the device and it's on there. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about that, making sure we're informing people of that. Then just this week they released another update, or a press release that said, oops, sorry, did we make that a setting that you can toggle? We didn't mean to do that, and they removed the setting altogether. So
it's there whether you want it or not.
If you're buying a Windows 11 AI PC, you're gonna have that setting just embedded in the operating system, as it were. So they again say it's stored locally for 3 months, and then they'll clear it. Are they? And then also, how long does it take before they just start uploading that stuff into the cloud and using it for everybody? So and
I'm curious what the end user license agreement is, EULA, right? Because are you allowing, is that where you're giving them permission to take your data and use it? And then use it for what? That is really interesting. And I'm super excited about AI. I ask my staff, every day I come in the office, I'm like, there's an AI thing here. There's AI there. There's AI. And I'm really talking to folks about, as you might imagine, I went into educational technology before it was a thing. So a little bit of an early adopter from time to time. And so I'm really excited about the potential of AI. And I think particularly in the language models, the large language models, there's so much opportunity for building efficiencies into systems. If we think about, processing any kind of overhead paperwork, from insurance claims, doctor's office visits, if you can have an Otter, or I don't know what they call it in Microsoft, where you can have it's listening to you and then it summarizes your notes and your meeting and all the things, right? Imagine that's going on while you're having a conversation with your physician. And now you're having an eye-to-eye conversation with your physician. All the details are getting recorded, and the physician doesn't have to spend their time doing it later and hope that their recall is, or doing it while they're talking to you and back and forth. So there's some real, and then I'm looking at it for higher ed, how we could better, for enrollment, folks who work in enrollment offices, going through the slog of all of those applications, if we could run those through an AI first, and that's the key. You got to have a human on the other side. It cannot just be AI, right? You got to have a human in the loop somewhere, if not more than in 2 or 3 places maybe. But just like you said, that first run through where the AI can just capture, if there is one that's a throw out or whatever, it's there's however the settings might be set, whatever the algorithm looks like, to distill down, thousands of applications. These schools are getting, applications from tens of thousands of kids, and there's 2,000 seats open. So I mean, how do you get through that? And then, figuring out like all of the scholarship opportunities and grants that come. So you're putting together financial aid packages. Like instead of a person, having to do that, can we get an AI system to do it? And then the person can actually spend their time talking to parents and families and kids, about what their opportunities are. And again, tweaking like, oh, maybe there's one, whatever. But just cutting down overhead in so many places. I think AI, like that's a huge opportunity. So I'm excited for that. But that's interesting that it's going to, because I always tell people would always be worried about, they would put tape over their webcams. I'm like, it's not recording you, but now it is.
Right. Yeah. There's certainly, to your point, such potential. We just, again, education and awareness on the issue. So if you don't mind, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the right to repair movement. And I know that you are a co-sponsor on an upcoming bill, and we are personally very excited about it, as I'm sure plenty of other people are. But any initial thoughts from you on that?
A long time coming. Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, working in, an enterprise system where you have, it has certainly improved, but you still to do repairs on devices, particularly, our fruity devices. It's a challenge, and it will void your warranty and all these other things that make it, again, so that you have to either buy the care plan or, you have to go to an authorized dealer or whatever it is, to the Apple store at the mall, and then wait your turn. And, it's unnecessary. There's plenty of folks out there who've been doing this as a side gig, who have the expertise. And I know, so I don't see, but like I said, it's a long time coming. It'll lower the cost for so many organizations and just people, to get your battery replaced or screen fixed or whatever. You can do screen fixes now, but, there's so many different levels of repair. And I think the consumer should have the right to repair their devices and get them repaired without, risking their warranties and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We would tend to agree with you on that. So this specific bill, 4562, what specific things are manufacturers going to be held to?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So that's why I was looking at the details on it a little bit. So it requires original equipment manufacturers that manufacture digital electronic equipment to make documentation, parts, and tools, including any updates to information or embedded software. Those need to be available to independent repair providers or to the owners of the digital electronic equipment on fair and reasonable terms. So if the equipment contains an electronic security lock or other security-related function, the manufacturer will be required to make available, again, in a fair and reasonable way, whatever you might need to disable that lock, the tools, that kind of thing.
We run into a lot with people who, because of the way that things are manufactured and whatnot nowadays, it's funny, you bust your phone or your computer or something like that, and the immediate thought is, I have to get a new one. And this is such a great move in the right direction for just having tools and parts and the knowledge that you would need to maybe not have to go buy the new one, especially when they're $1,200-$1,500 sometimes. So having the ability to either repair yourself or, like you said, find someone who has the knowledge or runs a repair program, and that they are now doing it at a reduced cost, because there's not such a large barrier to just fixing your phone. And a right to repair also covers just who owns the device at that point. You'd think that I purchased my phone and my computer and stuff and I would own it, but it's being held hostage in some way until things like this are really implemented. So I was talking a little bit ago, the rights of the user, and it's yes, I own this device, I have the right to
it repaired, or repair it myself. Like, yeah, that's, so it was, yeah. Like I said, I wrestled with this a lot when I was doing the technology in schools, as you can imagine. And, we had to do contracts through the providers or the product companies and things like that, or with their specific vendors for repairs and that sort of thing, where, we could do, our IT department was certainly qualified enough to do some of those repairs. Like you all, know what you're doing. And kids, it's interesting. The first computers, if I'm not mistaken, were built in a garage. So,
how far we've come.
Well, the idea that, that your average person perhaps is incapable of, dealing with this device, it seems like, well, wait a minute. They were originally designed, but this way. So yeah, I think the time has come. And, yeah.
Yeah, we're very excited to see this. And again, this is another example of something that we'd be happy and already supporting you on. So such a great movement. And it is part of a package of bills that also cover right to repair for like farm equipment and different things. There's like 4 other ones out there, and that's so important for our Michigan farmers. And it's great to see that all kind of come together as like a package, and we're happy to be included. So
well, and to your earlier point too, when you're talking about Comfort News business model, or your values and mission and things like that, and this fits perfectly. Like I said, there's no reason to buy a new device, but the inconvenience of having to get it fixed makes it so. Or the cost of having to ship it out. It's like, forget it, I'll just get a new one. And what happens to the old one? It ends up, on the floor in your study for
in the drawer. So. We always talk about the drawer that people have.
Yes, that's right. With all the old, I have an old click wheel. I have a click wheel iPad.
We love seeing those. We have like a little kind of collection of old things like that we try to set aside. That's funny.
He just was like so interested in it, and I'm like, and that was like hold what, 500 songs or something, 1,000.
And you bought them for 99 cents each. And you scrolled down the list with in a circle like that. Yeah. It'll really take you back.
Can I say this online? I had to jailbreak my iPod.
I think at this point the statute of limitations is running out on that.
Well, that was before they even called it jailbreaking. I didn't even realize what I was doing. But again, because of my background in tech, I was like, I had gotten a new computer and my iTunes didn't transfer because it wasn't the way it is these days. And I was like, I have all these songs. Why can't I get them off my iPad onto my new computer? Like, there's got to be a way. I'm sure there's a way, because I always tell people, if I'm thinking about it, somebody else has already done it. Like, I'm not that smart. So I was like, there's got to be a way to do it. So I get online and I'm like, how do I get songs off my iPod onto my computer? And I did it, and didn't break my device, and I had all my files there, but they were like numbered instead of named and things like that. But, and then I realized much later, I was like, oh, I kind of fancy. I kind of hacked my device.
I remember thinking about that and having some friends who jailbroke their stuff, and I was always the person that was like, they're gonna come for us. They know they know we're gonna jailbreak the iPod. I can't do it. They'll know I did it.
These days they probably would, because your device is listening to you, which surprised me when people are like, oh, my phone's lit. I think my phone can hear me. I'm like, of course it can, if you have Siri turned on, or if you have Google, because it has to listen for the cue word to wake up and respond to you.
Right.
And so, yes, it is collecting everything you say. And apparently also then selling those sound files to somebody, because that's how the advertisement ends up in your social media.
Where you get that ad and you're like, wait, how did they know? And they're putting it together.
Yeah.
Are there any other big initiatives that you're working on? I know we touched on so many of them already, but particularly one I noticed is in the 2025 Michigan State budget, there's at least $3 million going to solar energy at Butterworth landfill. And I guess if you want to touch on that or any other upcoming things.
So this is really exciting. This is something that you might recall Mayor George Hartwell.
Yeah.
This was something he wanted to do. And that Mayor Bliss was carrying across her tenure. And so here we are finally putting the crossing that T, so to speak. So I'm really excited that we were able to get the money, for this project to put a solar array at Butterworth. And then, as I understand it, that will help. I think the energy goes back into the city grid, which is similar to what we do at the waste energy plant energy, they have a deal with consumers and it helps power downtown and things like that. So, so I love this project because it is, it's using a piece of land that is, basically unusable. And it's providing, the energy of the renewable energy piece, which is going to cut down on, cost to the city and things like that, the pollutants and the, sorry, I just lost my words, but, it'll help with clean air and clean energy and all that sort of thing. But then also I think it's a fantastic example because as we're stepping into this renewable energy plan, and then the state has a great healthy climate plan where we're going to cut emissions, rather rapidly. I think it's by 2040, we'll be at net zero. So this really fits in well with that, but it also helps folks to see it in action, right? Or to normalize the idea of like, oh, we can use solar panels here. And there's so many, again, misconceptions about solar panels. When we've been talking about some of this work, people are concerned about the chemical runoff from a solar panel when it rains. I'm like, it's glass. There's no runoff.
Yeah.
It's just a piece of glass. So there's really some, like I said, kind of, strange understandings or misconceptions of what some of renewable energy looks like or how it impacts the community. And so I think it's important for our municipalities to be making those examples, and as they're building, be thinking about things like rooftop solar, or if they're putting in a new parking lot, can we put in, like they do at Michigan State, they have carports that are solar panels, right? What a great thing. Again, unusable space. So we're going to generate some and I think they generate like 10% of their electricity at MSU comes off those parking lots or something, 7 to 10 maybe. It's like it's a significant amount, right?
Significant, yeah.
And but it's a dual purpose because now you're parking under a carport. So if it's raining or snowing or whatever, I mean, it's a convenience to the driver, as well as providing energy. So for people to start to see how we can use these technologies in an interrelated way that provide more than one benefit, I think will help people to be more comfortable embracing that and exploring it on their own and, things like that. So excited for taking this first step and then seeing what that transpires into. Yeah,
that's very exciting. And you're so right about multi-use space or using the unused space. It's simple, but so effective. Some people just don't think about it. Especially when it's going back into the city. And like you said, even the waste to energy plant or these going back and circular economy, as it were. Yes.
And hopefully eventually we can get to even smaller, so we can do community, like real community small solar, where, I want to say in Glanville, there's a church that put solar panels up, because that's another, like churches have these big green spaces that they don't really use, or they have the perfect roof design, to put solar panels. And then, they could be giving energy back to like people who live in the near vicinity could be buying into their energy grid or getting credits back from that and then using that energy. And so I think there's some, again, like just starting to think about different ways, to support renewable energy is, it's exciting. Again, I'm an early adopter. I'm like, bring it on.
Yeah, you were doing it before it was cool.
That's right.
Well, you have so many great things going on. Thank you for taking the time and explaining those all to us. And and being a part of the podcast. And it's so great to hear about all of them. And we're so excited to support you on as many things as we possibly can. Just really great stuff. It's great to know we have some representatives out there who are so focused on these issues and are bringing them to light and implementing them and getting things done. Just thank you so much all the way around. And it was a pleasure having you today.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, if there's anything you all are thinking about too, just send it our way, and happy to, embed it, see what we can do with it, stuff like, whatever we can do to support the work you're doing is equally valuable. So thank you for all that you're doing in the community. And please stay a valuable partner. We'd love to work with you more.
Of course, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Don't Throw It All Away, a Comprenew podcast. Comprenew is a nonprofit electronics recycler and refurbisher in Grand Rapids, Michigan. All brands mentioned in this podcast have no affiliation with Comprenew unless otherwise specified. This podcast is produced by Peter Schlut, Alex Karakevich, and Rodney Gillian. Artwork provided by Maggie Antel, and music provided by Mocha Music.